For over 99% of human history, no one ever owned a clock. So, how did they know when to wake, when to eat, when to fight? The answer starts in the sky. Right now, somewhere near you, there is a clock. On your wall, on your wrist, on the screen, in your pocket. You probably checked one within the last hour without even thinking about it. Now, imagine that gone. No numbers, no ticking hands. No alarm to wake you, no calendar to remind you, no notification counting down the minutes until your next obligation. How would you know when to wake up, when to eat, when to plant a crop, or bury the dead, or start a war? The answer is stranger than silence. Ancient people were not lost in time. They were listening to it. Start with the simplest clock there ever was, the sun. Before sundials, before shadows were ever measured on purpose, the sun's position in the sky told you almost everything you needed to know. Low in the east, it was time to rise. Directly overhead, it was the middle of the day. Sinking behind the horizon, it was time to come home. This wasn't guesswork. It was constant daily observation, refined over generations, until reading the sky became as automatic as reading a clock face is for you now. But the sun alone wasn't enough. It disappears for half of every day, so ancient people turned to something that never left the sky completely: the stars. Archaeologist and astronomer Anthony Aveni has spent decades studying how ancient cultures tracked time through the heavens. His research shows that civilizations from Egypt to Mesoamerica built entire calendars around the rising and setting of specific star groups. In ancient Egypt, the star Sirius, disappearing from the night sky, then reappearing weeks later, just before dawn, marked the coming flood of the Nile. That single star told farmers when to prepare their fields. Not a clock, not a calendar on paper. A star, watched faithfully, year after year. Here's where it gets interesting. Time, to ancient people, wasn't a straight line of identical hours. It was a rhythm, a cycle, echoed everywhere they looked. The moon waxed and waned in a pattern so reliable that nearly every ancient calendar system used it as a foundation. 29 or 30 days, over and over, visible to anyone who simply looked up. You didn't need to write anything down. You just needed to notice. And they did notice, obsessively. Stonehenge, built in stages starting around 3000 BCE, aligns with startling precision to the sunrise of the summer solstice and the sunset of the winter solstice. Whoever built it wasn't just marking a special day. They were tracking the turning points of the entire year, using stone instead of ink. So if the sky told you the season, what told you the hour? This is where it gets more personal. Historian Gerhard Dorn von Rossum, who wrote an extensive history of the hour itself, points out that for most of human history, the hour, as a fixed, unchanging unit, didn't really exist the way you experience it. Ancient Egyptians divided daylight into 12 parts, but because daylight itself stretches and shrinks with the seasons, an hour in summer was simply longer than an hour in winter. Time bent to match the day, not the other way around. Think about what that means. Your hour is rigid, 60 minutes, always, whether it's June or December. Their hour breathed. It expanded under a long summer sun and contracted under a short winter one. It was less a measurement and more a description of where you were in relation to daylight itself. Sundials refined this. Water clocks, called clepsydra, refined it further, letting people measure time even at night or indoors by tracking how quickly water dripped from one container to another. Ancient Greek and Chinese engineers built increasingly sophisticated versions, some elaborate enough to chime or move mechanical figures. But even these devices were still, ultimately, servants of the sun. They needed to be reset and calibrated against sunrise and sunset to stay meaningful at all. Now here's the twist. You might assume that without precise clocks, ancient people were constantly late, constantly confused, missing appointments, and losing track of days. But evidence suggests something closer to the opposite. Anthropologist and historian Alexander Marshak argued, based on his analysis of markings on ancient bone tools dating back over 20,000 years, that early humans were tracking lunar cycles with remarkable consistency long before writing existed. Notches carved in sequence, matching the phases of the moon, suggest a level of environmental awareness that modern life has almost entirely erased. Without clocks, ancient people didn't drift through undifferentiated time. They were tuned into it. Farmers knew planting time by the angle of shadows and the blooming of specific plants. Sailors read the position of stars to navigate open ocean with an accuracy that still impresses modern researchers. Communities built entire religious and social calendars around solstices, equinoxes, and lunar phases, creating shared rhythms that everyone in a culture could follow without a single mechanical device. This raises an uncomfortable question. Who was actually more connected to time? You, glancing at a phone screen 100 times a day, anxious about minutes and deadlines? Or someone who read the entire sky like a familiar language, who felt the year turning in their bones because they watched it turn every single day without distraction? Something else is worth noticing here. Time, for most of human history, was communal. Bells in medieval towns rang not to tell one person the exact minute, but to synchronize an entire community for prayer, for work, for rest. Time was something you shared, not something you privately owned and guarded in your pocket. The clock in your hand right now is, in a strange sense, a very recent and very solitary invention. Mechanical clocks didn't fully take over daily life in Europe until roughly the 14th century, and even then, they spread first through monasteries, where monks needed consistent intervals for prayer. Precision, in other words, wasn't born from commerce or convenience. It was born from devotion. Only later did factories and railroads demand the kind of rigid, standardized time you now take for granted, dividing the world into time zones and synchronized schedules so that trains wouldn't collide and workers would show up at the same moment every day, without exception. So when you check your phone for the time today, you're not just looking at numbers. You're looking at the end point of a journey that started with someone squinting at a shadow, someone else carving notches into bone to track the moon, and generations of people who built their entire understanding of existence around watching the sky. The clock didn't invent time. It replaced a much older, much more intimate relationship with it. Right now, somewhere near you, there is a clock. But underneath it, if you let yourself notice, the same sun is still rising and setting, exactly as it did for every ancient person who ever looked up and simply knew. The sun is still rising and setting exactly as it always has. The only thing that changed is whether you're still watching.